Marc Caputo is a reporter for Politico, and he joins us now from Coral Gables, Florida. Marc, good to have you with us. Florida is reporting more than 9,500 new cases of COVID-19 in just the past day. So tell us more about why we're now seeing these record-breaking spikes of new coronavirus cases in the Sunshine State.
I think it might be as simple as the fact that more people are getting out, and relative to how many people are getting out, not enough of them are taking precautionary measures, either wearing masks or washing hands or practicing social distancing. The state has had kind of a patchwork approach to fighting coronavirus. The governor, Ron DeSantis, has, in a similar way that the president has deferred to locals, has himself deferred to locals. So, for instance, in Miami-Dade County, where I'm in, we've always been under an earlier and stricter lockdown relative to the rest of the state.
Well, you mentioned Governor DeSantis. He's recently issued a new order that people cannot consume alcohol on location at bars, meaning takeout and delivery only. This after Florida reported nearly 9,000 new coronavirus cases on Friday. Is there a discussion of closing down businesses again and reinstating a stay-at-home period in Florida, or does this look like it's as far as the governor is willing to take it at this point?
Well, it looks as far as the governor is willing to take it at this point. But the question is what does the next point look like? And one of the things that the governor doesn't appear to have fully appreciated was the fact that we are looking back in time with today's cases. So today's cases might reflect infections that started 2 weeks ago. And we're experiencing exponential growth and clear community spread. Just a few weeks ago, when that was occurring, the governor was downplaying the idea that there was community spread. So now he has changed his ruling or his rule, his order to not serve alcohol in bars. As I said before, being in Miami, we're under different rules. We've never been able to, under the lockdowns, have alcohol served in bars in this county. And the mayor of the county, Carlos Jimenez, has essentially closed or limited beach access for the July 4th weekend and is going to be taking other measures. And that's, again, in keeping with what Governor DeSantis had sort of wanted with the locals to take control. Now, there's also a political aspect of this, which is unavoidable, is that at the same time, the governor is saying, hey, look, the locals take control. If locals want to pass stricter rules than what I'm suggesting, they should go ahead. Well, the governor's mansion is based in Tallahassee, which is the capital seat of Leon County. And Leon County, the county commission there, has just passed a mandatory mask wearing ordinance in public. Well, it turns out that the chairman of the county chairman committee of the Republican Party of Florida is now using a state legislator who's also a Republican from the Orlando area to sue to block this. So there are sort of kind of mixed policy and political messages coming out of the broader Republican leadership, which is creating a certain amount of consternation among public health advocates who are worried that the pandemic is out of hand and that the state is not cracking down seriously enough, fast enough to prevent this.
Well, I think even for ordinary people, it's just confusing to have people tell you have to wear masks, then the governor says, no, you don't. Is there any indication, Marc, that that there might be a statewide requirement for masks in public when social distancing is impossible? And then the other thing I also want to ask you, back to my other question about DeSantis's order about alcohol in bars, why that in particular? Why is he making a statewide issue of alcohol being served in bars rather than perhaps focusing on something like masks?
There's pretty good evidence that Jacksonville, Duval County, had its first infections that spiked there. And incidentally, Duval County, Jacksonville is going to be where they're planning to hold the Republican National Convention. They had those first kind of start at bars. One of the things that containing coronavirus, the experts tell us is important, is practicing good social distancing, practicing good hygiene, wearing our masks. You know, there's nothing that really ruins human behavior like alcohol. So I didn't have an opportunity to ask the governor about this, but I think there's pretty strong anecdotal evidence that having a bunch of people gathered indoors and drinking alcohol is probably bad as far as reducing your inhibitions. And also you have your mask off and you're presumably, if you're infected, spreading coronavirus. Now, in fairness to Ron DeSantis, the governor, he has called on people to wear masks. He just hasn't passed a statewide mandatory mask wearing rule. And earlier this week, I had an opportunity briefly at a press conference to ask him, look, Governor, you've prided yourself on being the data-driven governor, taking a data-driven approach. There was a study recently done in Health Affairs, or published in Health Affairs, that showed the data indicate that in states that have statewide mask-wearing orders, there's lower transmission and spread of coronavirus. So how do you square that contradiction? He didn't quite square it when he answered me. He just essentially said, look, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, something he had said previously, actually, and that he is concerned about enforcement, and ultimately it's going to be up to other people. There is both a policy aspect to controlling coronavirus, let's say a mask-wearing ordinance or order statewide. There's also a rhetorical aspect and a performative aspect of it, and the governor is sort of slowly ramping that up. He's wearing masks himself much more often and much more clearly in public, and he's doing a better job saying, look, folks, you got to wear your masks. The question is it too late? How much of a problem is it? Well, we're going to see, again, even though today we're looking at 9,500 new infections or cases in the state, that's possibly a picture of what happened 2 weeks ago.
That's right. So, Marc, I'm wondering, given all of that, how are people in Florida feeling about the governor's response?
I haven't seen any polling recently that gives a good example or a good indication of how well he's doing. Now, relative to other governors, Governor DeSantis has actually fared worse in his approval ratings. That having been said, he is still in positive territory. There is some understandable resentment on the part of Governor DeSantis. The national news media, a lot of it based in New York, has kind of gone out of its way to single out Florida for its response. At the same time, Florida has about 3,400 dead people from coronavirus. New York has more than 30,000. Yet there is a sense among a lot of people here that New York's governor is getting sort of a pass, and DeSantis is having too much of an examination relative to the deaths and the hospitalizations that occurred. Now, DeSantis is sort of a proxy for President Trump here, and Florida is a must-win state for the president, and the president is not faring well in the state relative to Joe Biden. In the most recent polling averages, the president's down about 7 points to Joe Biden. Now, beware, polls are not performance. A poll or polls that are taken now are not proof of how the electorate's going to vote in November. Florida has a history of election margins, or razor-thin election margins, pardon me. And we've seen a number of come-from-behind victories in Florida from Republicans, despite what the polling says early on. So I would caution anyone into thinking that any single issue is going to be a determinative factor in Florida. The best bet that you can have in the state is it's going to be a really close election. Who's going to win? I have absolutely no idea.
Absolutely. There's a lot of things that can happen between now and November.
Oh, yes.
Marc Caputo, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.